Ollie's Ice Cream, Remax Mountain West, First State Bank of Colorado, State Farm Insurance, the Bras Hotel, Azura Cellars and Gallery, and Stone Cottage Cellars. Thank you very, very much for what you do here. I also want to give a special shout out to Jake Canode for running our live stream tonight. Besides being a techie wizard, he is also a realtor at Remax. So if you have a housing need, contact him. Wave, Jay. He's in the dark. Next, I would like to thank all our volunteers, because without our volunteers, this organization simply could not run. And for tonight, Don Grant and Paul Gatos took your tickets at the door. Lynn Wetherell manned the bar, and Margaret Yates helped us set up chairs for this thing this evening. So this event and many more are brought to you by the Blue Sage Literary Committee. And to say it's the Blue Sage Literary Committee is really not doing a service to who we are, because we are a very close collaboration with the Blue Sage, the Delta County Libraries, and the Paradise Theater. Everything that we do is a cooperative effort of those three organizations. And we put on a lot of different events throughout the year, including Delta County Reads and writing workshops and lectures and a lot of other things. So thank you, Literary Committee. Thank you very, very much for all the hours that you have put in to make these things happen. Now, I see the usual suspects out there, sitting there, looking usual, but keep it down, folks. This is a family affair. All right, so let's get this show on the road. Enough about me, let's move on. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first reader. She is a blonde bombshell and has been a driving force in this area as long as I've been here, and I don't know how long before that. Not to say that she's old, but it is my pleasure to introduce the inimitable Marla Bishop.
I didn't write any of that. Thank you all for coming tonight. You too, Blue Sage, Paradise Theater, thank you. I'm kind of nervous now that that all transpired. What am I doing this?
Here, I'll take that.
Thank you. I do have a thank you or two. Pamela over there at the Paradise, thank you for printing this out at the final hour. And my drink. Thank you, Pamela. And thank you to Brian. He knows who he is. The way the mind works when it should be sleeping. Am I shaking?
No, it's great.
On a particularly star-laden, bitterly cold night, Lois contemplates the world. Her smallish body, naked now, has been swathed in woolens, layered in protective coatings against the elements for what seems like ages. She does her best to keep warm while huddled beneath the blankets. Lois likes the man sleeping next to her in the night, but she doesn't like him breathing in her face, so she doesn't go in for the warmth of a bear hug. Every simple thought, every small infraction, every perceived injustice, every ache, every pain of the heart and of the body becomes magnified in yet another long, sleepless night of winter. Lois vows to look seriously into hormone replacement. And to also write to television stations and publications to stop adverts on the product Premarin and the use of this nightmare by uninformed women all over the world. An ill-conceived pill to be ingested by postmenopausal women so they could possibly sleep through the night. Sorry, all you young people. You'll get here eventually. This leads Lois to thoughts of government interference with women's rights to make choices with their own bodies. This segues into wondering when her grandchildren will visit and to purchasing airline tickets well in advance for the best price. She slips in a quick calculation of how old she'll be when her dog turns 10. From this ponderance, Lois's brain lets in thoughts of her most recent ex-boyfriend sailing on a yacht with his well-off Greek boyfriend. Well, who knew? Maybe she knew. He had said that he'd place enormous value in a mate who could take care of themselves completely and not rely on him in any way. He had also said what really turned him on was a clean house. He had found love, finally, with a man who had what turned him on: his own money and a penchant for house cleaning. Now that she's lying here thinking about it, Lois realizes a mate like that would turn her on too. Good Lordus. Lois knows to be careful with thoughts that travel in certain directions, because catty observations, such as whose face is more wrinkled, hers or the woman's sitting next to her in church, guarantees that when Lois next looks in the mirror, 3 extraordinary wrinkles will appear and warn her once again of the pitfalls of cattiness. This, in fact, has happened when Lois has taken notice of the lips, hips, or butts of other women being unattractive. Lois's very plump, attractive lips deflated, her own butt dropped inches, and her waistline morphed into her hips within hours of the note-taking. The man asleep next to Lois has proclaimed his love. He doesn't care that she is a terrible housekeeper and has no money. He is happy that she smiles. She doesn't know when she will love again, and the middle of the night seems like a perfect time to hash this out, to tumble it around in the brain to no good end. Spring would soon be upon this portion of Earth, and nights wouldn't be so exhausting in their darkness. Lois took to giggling, thinking how times had changed her. She had always loved long nights, so conducive to reading and romance. Now, a glass of wine at dinner guaranteed the embrace of whoever was the polar opposite of the Sandman at 3 a.m. Daybreak is finally on the horizon. Lois hauls herself out of bed, puts on the coffee, and thanks her God for the life that she lives and everyone in it, and for the view out her window. What she doesn't know yet about the day ahead is that she will be given the gift of a sound night's sleep for all the nights to come. This will show up in a tiny tablet that Lois breaks in half and takes every bedtime. 2.5 milligrams of THC. Quite legal in her state and hormone-free. Lois has worked up the nerve to announce this from the pulpit of her church. Collective gasps for sure. But then edible sales ramp up threefold in the next county, and their sidewalks get repaired. must apologize for every young person in there. And now I would like to introduce Sapphire Black.
Where I'm from. I am from Groovy Girls, from the smell of burnt toast and the sound of the tea kettle in a small town in Colorado. I'm from skiing in the cold winter on steep slopes, drinking hot chocolate with little marshmallows. I'm from biking on sidewalks and selling lemonade by the street, from playing hopscotch and rollerblading down to town. I'm from so many different memories who make where I'm from who I am. And next up is Ellie Fetter.
Okay, so I wrote a poem called All in All. Blossom, bloom, they fruit to fall, then rot away till winter falls. The ice sheet covers all in all. Then spring they blossom all to fall. But at the orchard, all in all, are picked and plucked and preserved for all in all. I would like to introduce Sunshine Night.
Hello. Yeah, I'll adjust it. It's good. Just don't fall. So thank you guys all for coming out tonight. I'm so excited to be here and honored. So thank you, Paonia Literary Committee, for choosing me to read tonight. I'd like to give a huge shout out to the Paradise crowd across the street. Woohoo! I'm going to read to you a ghost story. Again, that's what I do. It is from Book 2 of the Bartholomew Caw series, and it's just the first few pages. The Possessions of Bartholomew Caw. The best thing about being dead is the mobility. A lesson Samantha, the whore, taught me. But if I'm being honest, her lesson was liberating. The living believe ghosts can only haunt one place or only one person. This is not so. I only wish it didn't take me almost 100 years to realize I am free to move about the world. I am no longer imprisoned in my home by fear and uncertainty. In life, I had been raised to believe no matter how horrible the sin I committed in life, God would accept me home and I would be forgiven. He never sent me a chariot or even an angel to show me the way home. Instead, he forced me to find alternative entertainment for my continued earthbound existence. I am a Beelzebub. However, I recently learned a piece of very useful information. The living have cracks in their souls. The first time I discovered this was pure coincidence. It is unfortunate it took me so long to figure this out, but all I have left now is time. The Possession of Lainey Schnell, September 1984. Stafford had changed for the worst. I no longer knew landmarks or street names. This made venturing away from my home dangerous. I'd gotten lost once before after my attempt at killing Samantha. It had taken me months to find my way back again. In the time I had been away, the whore and the carpenter had done things, horrible things, to keep me from entering my own yard. Some invisible barrier blocked me, the invisible ghost. Now I haunted the sidewalk outside my picket fence. My home no longer resembled the mess the previous inhabitants had left it in. For all the wrong things Samantha did, she at least did that one thing right. My house was beautiful again. It was a dark green now with chocolate brown trim and shutters. The porch had been restored so it no longer sagged. The wrought iron railing on the upstairs balcony was now painted a shiny black. I never saw Sam or Alex sit on the balcony, which was odd, but looking at it was one of my enjoyments. I wished I could sit on the balcony looking over the neighborhood, watching all the pissants go about their daily lives. One afternoon, when the sun was burning bright and a few of the cottonwood leaves had begun to change from green to yellow, two obnoxious girls approached. They were screeching at the top of their lungs, loud enough to get my attention. Mostly, I didn't pay the people on the street any mind, but these girls would not shut up. Their singing sounded like cats being eaten by something wild. One of the girls wore a ratty t-shirt and holey jeans. Her long brown hair hung down, greasy and tangled. Dark eyes looked like holes in her white face. The other girl clashed with everything she passed. Bright red hair, a purple skirt, and a pink and white floral blouse. What kind of parent would let their child out of the house like that? The girls would no doubt end up like streetwalkers. I turned my attention back to my home, still trying to figure out a solution to what had been done to me. Crystals had been placed in each corner of the yard, and the idiot man who taught the whore about gardening and crystals came once a week and polished them. In the winter, they were often the only things in the yard not covered in snow. I didn't understand how the dead plants could keep me out, or exactly how the crystals had any effect on me, but there was little in this life that made any sense anymore. The weather was changing. In the mornings, I could see the breath of the inhabitants of my house when they went out to warm up their cars. I often wondered if they thought of me. Did she still dream of me? When she was with her carpenter, did she remember how I made her moan? I hoped so. I imagined she missed me, filled with regret for banishing me into the cold, alone and friendless, lost in a world where I was isolated, even from other beings like me. The two girls were now within a few feet of me. Their screeching had reached power saw levels. I stepped into their path, hoping to shut them up, and I collided with the girl with black eyes. We fell to the ground. I'd passed through the living before many times, occasionally getting snagged if they were angry or bitter. But now, after trying to pass through the girl with the black eye makeup, I couldn't get back out. I pushed against her human confinements with no success. What curious sensations. It had been so long since I felt a heart pump blood or lungs breathe, and I could smell. Oh, the smells! The other girl was standing so close. Our eyes were still closed, but I could smell her. The chemical perfume she wore was nauseating. I lay on the ground, struggling to get out. I felt the black-eyed girl's confusion. Why was she laying on the sidewalk? What had been in the weed Mark gave her? Her confusion matched my own. I couldn't get out, no matter how much I pushed against her physical body. After being and feeling nothing for so long, it was strange to feel such physical sensations. I couldn't hear what the red-haired girl said over the pounding of the heart, over the whooshing of the air through the lungs. Pain pulsed through the arm from the bruised and scraped skin where the girl's elbow smacked into the asphalt. I stretched out, still struggling to leave the body, but I couldn't escape. I was trapped. How had this happened? So I have the honor of introducing somebody very special to me, and you guys are in for a treat. She is a creative genius, and the most impressive part is she was raised by wolves. Not even kidding. Her own words. I'd like to present Brandy Musto.
Hello. Thank you all for having me. I'd like to read a few poems for you tonight. The first of which I call Memory Foam. Memory foam. A box springless mattress haphazardly thrown on the floor in the corner of a bachelor pad bedroom was alluring to us, a cocktail waitress and a roughneck. We raced there after last call, and your sculpted arm swept me into the frayed down comforter, and you had me before I slipped off my shoes. Delirious, I laid there naming our unborn children to myself, listening to the cadence of your snore. But now, our four-poster bed seems empty when you're in it, and less so when you're not. You've gone drilling for samples, looking for treasure. The flesh around the core is picked clean. I seek tenderness from Egyptian cotton sheets and warmth from the cashmere comforter. But thread count can't cure lonely. When you slip in and roll to the edge and onto your side body, I think about the king-size pillow top and how small it was new. Warranty doesn't cover stretch. The return policy is nil. Locked in by a contract we wrote ourselves, I roll to the edge of my designated valley, and the middle mound grows. Perhaps we cut corners we can't mend, but I long for a marriage bed like a memory foam mattress that forgives redundant daily imprints and springs back to remember its original condition. This one, I recently sustained a loss, and I forgot a tissue. So if I pull out my toddler routine with the wiping of the nose, please forgive me. This one is called Grandma Dot. Dad clears his throat but strains on the other end of the line, and I know. It was a long time coming. She was ready, but I am not. I fumble words like gargled bourbon, contritely mumble, and drop the call into the depths of my backpack with Chomsky, Cicero, and a broken spine Nella Larson novel. My notoriously combative rhetoric professor observes my damned tears, tilts his head and slides his wire spectacles up a scrunched-up nose to a sympathetic brow, offering me sanctuary from the watchful lecture hall. His unexpected kindness breaks the dam, and convulsive cries surge into a hyperventilating cyclone that drenches his shoulder. Excused for the day, I decline, and I stay. Alone, I fear the trench of distress might consume me. I traverse the day in a vacuous state until in seminar, the protagonist's lover dies of AIDS in a beautiful memoir of a hateful world, and his shattered heart releases an anguished howl I don't recognize, but it sends me home to listen to Moon River on repeat until my toddler knows the lyrics. The lyrics of my safety song, the one that tastes like cherry peppers and ribbon candy. It smells like white shoulders and Virginia Slims, and it feels like snuggling under a heavy cotton afghan by the fire. Dot was anything but small, straight, striking, literally 6 foot tall, a hard woman who played favorites. She left a family divided if she was tough to love, but I was her favorite. She was an abused, thorny, unhealed heart from a tough life of disappointments, but she lived with the volume up and the windows open. My sisters say her lashes desecrated barriers as if suggestion. She labeled them, fat one, ugly duckling, a first cousin, the promiscuous one. She drove snowmobiles and wicked words, but traced bunny patterns on my face to help me sleep in her silk nightgowns I pretended were formal wear. She loved me at the bottom of the barrel, in bouts of belligerence and extended absences. She was a contradiction of every kind. A woman with a vein for vanity that rocked loud print blouses, gaudy costume jewelry, and polyester pants. She kept a fridge stuffed full of leftovers and margarine tubs covered with elastic saran-wrapped shower caps. She outfished Grandpa Jack, but she sang like Joe Stafford. And when I couldn't handle my life, she was she She hid me away in a world of oatmeal cookies and gin, rummy. A cutthroat competitor, the arch of her brow raised with a point spread. We took shots of Grand Marnier the last time we played. She was 89. Sorry, excuse me. After 400 miles of Wyoming snowfall with 3 small children in tow, I drink heavily in her honor, since she can't, and my white knuckles and French tips cling to a tissue wad bigger than Grandpa's famous rubber band ball. It catches the pain pouring from my face. Her brunette hair is set to perfection, cosmetics flawless, but it's all wrong. She's so small, all 6 feet, in her purple paisley chiffon blouse she wore for family pictures 28 years ago. And she's still not at rest. She's void of any part of her. Why can't I look or leave? I search and I stare, but she's gone. Tomorrow they will reduce her to ashes. I loved her best, I should speak. My uncle, her firstborn, winks to me in the pew where I shudder and sob, and he didn't ask me to speak because he knew no words would come. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for the tears. Whew, thought I got it out in practice. And then we'll lighten the mood a little with a poem about wine, my favorite thing. It's called Viognier My Way. Dry and less fruity than usual, the initial decanter delivers delicate acrimony, like crunching into a fresh rose petal. Yet I manage to drain the next one. Dry on the palate, but oily on the center of my tongue, peach perfume with notes of melon and honeysuckle on the full-bodied Roseanne. Bold, elegant, fleshy amber, aged in oak, slowly slides her legs to the surface, more poised than a flinty chablis that stings when it slips past my painted lips, like toes in lacy stiletto blonics. I count 6 chimes. I start a champagne Brie Blanc. I pull the toasted baguettes, baked brie with honey and currants. I refill the decanter and light the bourbon-soaked vanilla candles before I remember that he wanted spicy elk tacos. Thank you. Thank you all very much. So for your next reader, I would like to introduce John Mitchell.
Well, thank you. I've wanted to be a writer since I was about 12 when I saw one of those matchbook covers that said, "Be a writer." I think there's enough people my age in here to remember those days. My essay is called Conversations I Have Overheard. In a bar, 2 young commercial fishermen are sitting next to me at the bar of a local restaurant in Aberdeen, Washington, both checking their phones and texting. One says to the other without looking up, "Do you have any naked pictures of your girlfriend on your phone?" The other guy says, "Yeah," and still not looking up. They each make a few taps and then trade phones. I try not to look. In the courthouse, Colorado Springs, Colorado, I'm in a jury pool. A young woman across from me answers her cell phone. "I'm waiting to see if I get picked to be in a jury," she tells the caller. She listens for several seconds. "Oh no, I don't want to get out of it," she says. "I'm hoping it's a murder case. Maybe I'll get to give someone the death penalty." On a ski lift, Powderhorn, Colorado. 2 young men get on the lift with me, the fellow on the far end building up a good head of steam as he complains to his buddy. "I told her not to plan a fellowship meeting on Super Bowl Sunday." She says, "Well, what would Jesus do?" But she goes ahead and schedules the meeting anyway and then wonders why half the people don't show up. And she chooses that date before it was known Denver and Seattle were going to be playing in the Super Bowl. So she comes home from the meeting all upset because sister blessed her out. Can you believe that? Sister, who's usually so quiet? So now my wife is all ready to quit as head of the group. I try to make her feel better by reminding her that my old pastor said if you don't have to fellowship angry at you, you're probably not doing a very good job. Well, that doesn't make her feel any better. I tell you, this whole thing is putting a strain on our marriage. I hate Tuesday nights. It should be the best night of the week, but now it's the worst. There's never any dinner. To all this, his friend replies, I like Friday nights. In my backyard, Fort Collins, Colorado, I'm repairing a sprinkler head hidden behind shrubs that border a popular walking trail. 2 women stroll by, one talking to the other. He's so damn lazy, all he wants to do is ride his bike. He doesn't even want to make love. Well, who needs him as long as I have a pair of warm socks and a vibrator? Later, 2 guys on bikes ride past side by side. Done with my work, I'm sitting on my deck with an excellent view of the surrounding natural area in the low mountains of western Fort Collins. Man, I'd hate to live right on this path, one yells to the other. I can hear you, I holler after them. I wonder if maybe he's the husband of socks and vibrator. If so, I think I see the problem. In a movie theater, I'm at a movie in Hanover, Virginia with my wife. The theater is full. After the film is over and the lights go up, everyone stands waiting to get into the aisle to exit. A young man with a big mustache in the row behind me remains seated, pulls out a cigarette and lights up. With his first exhale, he looks around and announces to no one in particular, man, if you had a fire in here, no one would get out. Above the Grand Canyon, on a flight to the west coast from Virginia on a wide-body jet, I stand in the back of the aircraft stretching my legs. The captain comes on over the intercom to let we passengers know that if we look out the right side of the aircraft, we can see the Grand Canyon. A woman in her 70s, who for lack of a better description seems very New York, takes a look and announces loudly and clearly unimpressed, well, it's not very big, is it? We're at 30,000 feet and you can see it, another man standing nearby answers. The woman furrows her eyebrows and takes another look. At the post office in Elkton, Virginia, I'm waiting in line to pick up a package. An older woman stands in front of me holding a little dog on a leash. The man in front of her turns and looks at the dog. That's a Pekingese, isn't it? The old woman holds the dog up high and smiles. The dog seems to smile back. Well, my brother gave him to me, the lady explains. And when he went to register him, he couldn't spell Pekingese. So he wrote down Chihuahua. So you see, even though he's a Pekingese, he's registered as a Chihuahua. The man she is speaking to starts to say something else, but instead nods and turns back around. The Pekingese Chihuahua starts to pant. Evidently, he has heard this story before. At St. Mary Corps Hospital in Pueblo, Colorado. In my role as an administrator, I'm making daily rounds in the hospital. I approach a room in a medical unit where an elderly man has been moaning and yelling out the past few days. I notice that it is quiet, so I wonder if he has been transferred, discharged, or maybe died. But when I reach his room, he's sitting up in his chair, a beautiful, peaceful smile on his face. A nurse is kneeling on the floor in front of him with her back to me. She is speaking to him in a low voice while she rubs his arm. I cannot hear what she is saying, but her low tone is comforting and loving. The half-light in the room from the partially closed blinds lights up her white uniform. She is truly angelic. I stand there for over a minute. The patient never sees me, so intent is he listening to his nurse and looking into her eyes. Later, when I find out that the nurse is going through treatment for breast cancer, it brings tears to my eyes. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Paul Epps, who seems like a very nice fellow. I felt like I had known him forever when he introduced himself, so I know you'll enjoy him. Thank you.
Thank you, Paonia. Can you hear me out there? Hello, Cinema Paradiso. I have a story here. It's a story based upon an experience I had earlier this year in Arizona. I'm calling it a story based on true events, although I have no witnesses. One recent day, I decided to take a hike at Sycamore Creek. I hadn't been there in decades, and it held a certain mystique. Back then, I walked the mesas high until late afternoon, and while it glistened in the stream, I sang beneath the moon. Survival in the desert scene depends on several things, water being one of them, the one a hiker brings. And then there's knowledge of the land and caution above all, for many threats exist therein, like needles and stumbles and falls. But back to hiking way back then, when water filled the stream, and every time I ventured forth, I had my green canteen. The object of my several walks was usually the same, to get to places high and thus observe the near terrain. When I'd settled on where to sit, on rock or root or ground, it was always near a saguaro, from whose shade I'd look around. Then, satisfied eventually with all that I had seen, I'd rise and set off once again with my trusty green canteen. This time when Sycamore called to me, the creek was running dry. And when I went to check it out, a mountain lion skulked by. Later on, a skunk was seen around my humble camp. I wondered if the animals were seeking something damp. Next morning, I was up at dawn with thoughts of hiking long. So with apple and the green canteen, I began the day with song. At some point walking up the wash, I stopped to eat the fruit. The wonder of being alone like this way had started to take root. For there's nothing quite as challenging as the desert's thorny shield, where everything defends itself and can't afford to yield. Before too long, I got the itch to climb a saguaro mound. I left sweatshirt and canteen and soon was upward bound. It's a peculiar habit for me to have in leaving water behind, but I never left a thing behind that I didn't later find. So up I climbed with careful step, past mesquite and prickly pear, past palo verde and cactus on a trail that wasn't there. When I reached the beckoning desert tree, I did a little dance. I'd waited many moons for precisely such a chance. I walked and lingered long enough to savor every scene, but came the time to get back to the trusty green canteen. Down I went, around I went, until I paused to see the green canteen down below, still waiting there for me. It was now a matter of minutes until I joined them where they lay, from where we'd move on up the gulch until perhaps midday. The downward tack is trickier and takes attentiveness, for haste and one mistake could mean a painful, spiny mess. When at the bottom of the hill I looked for something green, it took me just a blink to note it was nowhere to be seen. How could the shirt and cherished jug have disappeared in space? Unless I was mistaken when I saw them from that place. But I'd never left a thing behind I didn't later find. I'd never left a thing behind that I didn't later find. And so I searched and searched the site for several hours straight, but finally had to call it off since it was getting late, and also I was stumbling some and didn't want the pain that comes from tramping carelessly in desert-like terrain. I left that day while vowing to return again, to look, to see if maybe they had fallen into some hidden nook. Delay upon delay kept me far from Sycamore, until a month of days had made me ready to the core. And when at last I did return, I cast a wider net and sought to look beyond the place where I was sure I'd set the green canteen on top of shirt and took off up the hill. So on through narrow gulch I wound, around and through, until what should I suddenly espy but canteen and sunburned shirt, neither of them damaged and with very little dirt. I puzzled over how such a strange scene came to be, and then remembered the mountain cat prowling close to me when first I wandered near the creek to see what I could see. It maybe found me later out of curiosity and tried to make off with the goods like carrying its young. Then when it heard me coming, just dropped them in the sun. I believe, but can't be sure, that what went down out there that time was something quite unusual, something quite sublime. I fear for creatures big and small in such a habitat, but one might find some pleasure in being burgled by a cat. Thank you. And the next reader is the lovely Kate Redmond.
Thank you. This story came out of a workshop that I took here at the Blue Sage with a Western State professor. And it was a flash fiction workshop, which is not my genre. I usually do poetry. But I thought, I can learn something, and I went, and I did learn a lot. And I ended up writing a flash nonfiction, excuse me. And this is a story that is like an individuation story. As a child, when you realize that your parents are wrong about something. My long ride. Our town was not racist toward black people. There were no black people in our town, or any of the neighboring towns, even the big ski resort with the movie theater. We were racist against Mexicans. In summer, my horse was my babysitter. All 8 of us kids were booted out of our 800 square foot house at dawn and not allowed back till dusk, when our appearance was mandatory. In 14 hours, my horse could cover a lot of ground. I knew trails, gates, bogs, streams, and shade. I took a big lunch that I made myself. I knew to steer clear of the Mexican railroad workers who worked on the tracks because my dad told me to. He told me they would rape me, but I didn't know what that word meant. This cloudless day, they waved me over. Boldly, I approached. I slid off the back of my fat, sweaty gelding, even though I knew it meant I would have to ask one of the men to hoist me back up, as bareback was the only way I was allowed to ride, unless I was rodeoing. They were relaxing under cottonwood, eating lunch. I pulled out my carrots, cold baked potato, and bologna sandwich on white bread, small tart apple, and Kool-Aid. There were a lot of charades as the 5 men teasingly eyed my lunch, and I eyed theirs. Theirs genuinely looked better. And we worked out trades, an apple for a mango, which I had never tasted, and a meager bologna squished mess for a beef taquito that had hidden jalapenos. They laughed when my face turned red and my eyelids began to sweat. One man translated for the other 4. Where did I live? If I told them, would they come cut us in the night? How many cattle did we have? Were they assessing if they could easily slaughter one unnoticed? Did my parents know I was out riding alone? I did it all the time, I said, with a bravado that would become my theme song. Then it was time for me to ask them questions. The first one I thought of to ask was what rape meant. But I decided against it. I asked where their families were, and one by one they pulled color photos from their wallets and said their wives' and children's names like a prayer. Why did they come here to work? There was no work in Zacatecas. They would send money home, then return in the fall when the work dried up. Their wives were proud of their bravery and dedication. I knew what those words meant, even before he translated them. I rose to go, and they all stood. I mimed that I needed help onto my horse. The youngest man laced his fingers in a cup and, smiling, nodded my left foot into them. My horse showed off and peeled out across the meadow, with 5 waving and windmilling cowboy hats cheering our long ride.
Not bad, huh? All right, folks, you get released for intermission. So go buy wine, drink beer, go outside, take a breath of air, cool off a little. And we will see you back here in about 15 minutes. One more round for our beautiful readers.